All right, we're back. Sorry about that. I was actually on my phone. I was USB tethered on that, but apparently that was not working out for whatever reason.
Yeah, it stopped for some reason.
I don't know if it ran out of data or I don't really know.
Yeah,
so
we're on the home system now.
We went back to the home system, so hopefully this will work. Because shit, man, I feel like I've only got like halfway through.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
It's green. Since connection's good, everything's going, so.
Yeah, for now.
Right.
I don't trust it. I just don't.
Yeah, whatever.
So, yeah. So what were we talking about? Matthias says, why
and y'all didn't miss anything. As soon as that shit went fucking sideways.
Well, yeah, I can see the little, on OBS, I can see the little green light going to like red and yellow, and I'm just like, oh fuck, I'm not saying anything important now, so you know.
So y'all didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
How many we got?
Matthias said, why, he retracted it, but he said, why another episode? It's like, yeah, our connection crapped out, so we just like
They're telling me to fucking get the wigs out. Okay, it must be time for a wig. Look, 17.
Oh, it's too bad that you don't. Yeah, you should. You need to.
I'm gonna get the fucking white wig.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Oh shit, the wig's way up there, Jen.
We'll get it.
Way up in the fucking sky.
I tried to put the ones that you wore more often, like at down low, and then I had to put some up there because I only have so much room.
She's got a whole dressing room in here now.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm liking. I got a whole little like fucking situation.
I'm gonna put my fucking ultimate white boy wig.
There you go.
I put this on, and all of a sudden I become even more Caucasian. I become a real honky.
Yeah.
There we go. Damn. Fuck,
you're gonna like pontificate on some like
fucking smarter and more powerful when I have this on.
You gotta put some glasses on too. You look like
fucking. Where are my glasses? Where are my glasses?
You look like some fucking George Washington or Thomas Paine.
Yeah. I'm ready to fucking emancipate some shit.
He's gonna emancipate
some shit. Fucking gonna proclamate. With
your little curl hanging down.
Yeah, proclamating.
See, you need a whole outfit to go with that. You need a whole like frock coat.
I do.
You need,
I have one.
You need the tights and the buckle shoes. You need all
that
shit.
Shoes. I don't have.
You need the shoes.
The short pants.
Yeah.
With the stockings.
Little breeches.
Yeah, the breeches that make your calves look good and shit.
That's what I'm saying.
How sexy a man was, how good his calves were.
Why don't dudes wear that shit anymore? I'm into that.
Gay.
No, that's okay.
What is this in here? Something's in here.
I don't know.
Look at this shit.
Oh.
What the fuck was that doing?
No, that's from the wig stand.
Okay, wig stand.
You pulled it off along with the wig stand.
Yeah, all right.
I have, if you go on Amazon, they have these really cool, they're only like a couple bucks each. They have these little wig stands that either they're plastic and like you snap them together, and they'll either like sit on a tabletop, or they have ones that like hang like in your closet, which is very helpful.
This is fucked up.
That's not. Yeah.
This is fucking totally wrong.
Rock me Amadeus.
What happened to this wig?
Amadeus.
What happened to this wig? I'm gonna have to fucking get the curls going on this shit again.
You're just gonna be back there doing that? It's gonna be so distracting.
Yeah, no, we can't do it. Go ahead and run with the show. This thing's supposed to have two curls here. A curl there and a curl there.
You gotta like do maintenance on the shit. You figure it out. You figure it out.
Go ahead.
So what were we talking about? We're talking about Lord Byron.
Lord Byron.
So he was married in 1815, and they had a daughter, Ada. Fun fact: this daughter, who was actually taken away from Byron, probably justifiably so, like very early on, by his wife. Well, it was a baby. Well, honestly, I wouldn't put it past Lord Byron. It's like, well, it's a baby. That's a sexy baby.
Yeah, he's like, look at the legs on that baby.
Right. I mean, I'm sorry, Lord Byron. Yeah, well. This baby would turn out, when she grew up, to be the very famous Ada Lovelace, who, many years before the computer was actually invented, actually came up with a theoretical computer.
Really?
In 1843. Ada Lovelace. So, look her up. So it's Lord Byron's daughter. There you go. So basically, Lord Byron and his wife, they had the kid. They were only married for like a year, and then his wife was like, yeah, fuck this shit, and left with the daughter. Because at this point, Lord Byron had also started porking his half-sister, which the wife was understandably a little upset about. So she's like, basically, I'm taking this kid away, and I don't want you to have anything to do with this kid ever. So she raised the kid to be a mathematician. And like I said, the kid would be Ada Lovelace.
Matthias said this is the Omega Man family coat wig. Matthias was from the Omega Man.
I like that.
Yeah, Matthias.
Yeah. So in the spring of 1816, Lord Byron, because of this scandal, he decided he was going to get the fuck out of Dodge, in this case England, because everyone was kind of pointing their fingers at him, calling him a hoe or whatever the equivalent was. So he ended up going to Geneva in Switzerland. Now, while he was there, he got into, like I said, he was hanging out with Percy Shelley, Mary Godwin, and Claire Clairmont. Like I said, Claire Clairmont was trying to get on that dick. So they were all kind of like, and Lord Byron was like, okay, I'll accept your vagina. But he was kind of more interested in this whole Percy Shelley, Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin situation. I don't know. Like, I don't know if he wanted like a threesome or a foursome. I don't know. It was kind of one of those things. Interestingly, at this time period, when Lord Byron and Percy Shelley and Mary Godwin and all of them like hooked up or were all hanging out together, at the time, like society at large called them the League of Incest.
Yeah. So they're thinking like I'm thinking. That's how I fucking.
Which that needs to be a band name.
The League of Incest.
It sounds like a bunch of supervillains. We're the League of Incest.
League of Incest.
I guess because Byron was humping his half sister, and everybody kind of knew about it. So
that's what they're talking about.
Yeah, so it was kind of this whole it was this whole situation.
She couldn't resist.
I guess. Or he couldn't resist forcing himself on her. I don't really know how old she was at the time. Maybe she was willing. I'm not entirely sure.
I'm pretty sure that was a fucking two-way street.
They're like, we're not that related. Is it that way?
We're not that related. This is spiritual.
Oh, my God. But yeah, so, I mean, Lord Byron, like I said, didn't really have, he's like not the original, but kind of one of the textbook definition of like a bad boy. Like I said, a rock star.
Right, yeah.
So he didn't really have any shortage of women wanting to jump on the D.
Right.
You know. So yeah, during 1816, he's running off in shame to Switzerland to kind of hide. And so he invited what? What?
I gotta get out of here. I'm getting too much pussy.
Well, I guess he didn't really like as much pussy as he was getting. He couldn't just be like, "Fuck all you fuckers, I'm just getting pussy." And it's nobody. But I guess he was bothered. By the reputation that he was getting. He didn't want to be. He didn't want to be in the League of Incest.
He's in the League of Incest.
I don't want to be in the League of Incest.
So he started to become a little bit like the Marquis de Sade.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely has that kind of vibe.
Although I got a feeling that fucking he was cuter than the Marquis de Sade. The Marquis de Sade was ugly.
From paintings I've seen of Lord Byron, he was a pretty dashing motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like I said, at least when he was young. I read a book about this, like a couple books about this. And one thing I remember was that Lord Byron, they said he was super foxy when he was younger, very, very dashing, very handsome. But because he had, and a lot of kind of upper class, like nobility had gout at the time because of their rich diets and indolence, generally, I guess, so I think he had a tendency to like pork out, you know what I mean? So he kind of like got heavier as time went on.
Food.
Although, like I said, neither he nor Shelley lived very long. They died quite young. Yeah. So I don't know if he just would have been like a big, like Jabba the Hutt when he was older. But I think he did like chunk out. Like
they had very bad food quality back then.
They did.
The difference between carbohydrates, fats, or proteins. They just fucking ate whatever tasted good. And I'll tell you what tastes good is fat. Fat tastes good and carbs taste good.
It does. I even had a nutritionist tell me that. They're like, look, it's just like humans are, through our evolutionary history, we're designed to crave fat and sugar.
Yeah.
That's just how nature designed, because we needed calories, like, for most of our lives. Yeah. But nowadays, there's so much food everywhere that it's like that's not really a good, successful survival strategy anymore.
You think that fucking eating chicken and all that's great. Until you have these motherfuckers on performance-enhancing drugs, they're eating nothing but chicken and broccoli, and they will tell you it drives them fucking crazy not to have fucking carbohydrates and fats. They're like, you would think that chicken and meat and beef you could live on that.
Well,
after a few weeks, you can. Oh no, your body will grow huge. After a couple weeks, you start craving any kind of carbohydrate or any kind of fucking fat. You're just like
Yeah, and you start getting, there's a reason that hangry is a word.
Yeah.
I mean, because for most of humans' evolutionary history, food was scarce.
Yeah.
So you needed something that was like very fatty, sugary, or something like that because it had a lot of calories because that would sustain you.
Yeah.
Now that food is like ubiquitous and it's very easy to get to, at least in the Western world, we're kind of hosed.
Yeah.
Because it's like we want all this stuff, but it's like we don't need that much food.
When I was in the army, we had a bunch of island boys in there from fucking Micronesia. We had them from Samoa. We had them from Hawaii, and fucking it was the funniest thing in the world. Fucking you couldn't get those motherfuckers to eat fucking lobster. Like, lobster? Fuck, they give that shit away for free at the bar.
I kind of feel like that happened in New England a lot. They just kind of thought of it was like trash food because it was everywhere.
I said, dude, man, I could live off lobster. And they go, no, you couldn't. Fucking, we tried to live off of lobster. Fucking, I don't remember if that was Micronesia or Hawaii. And they were just like, no, you can't. After a while, you just get so sick of that. We were fucking spending money hand over fist to get Spam. Because Spam wasn't lobster.
Because it wasn't lobster.
Yeah.
I mean, even the best food is going to get old after a while.
Yeah,
you like, I mean, food, you want variety.
Fuck, man. One time when I was in Egypt, fucking the British fucking army, the British fucking army contractors fucking had lobster day, and most motherfuckers wouldn't eat it. And me and a whole table of fucking like 8 dudes sat there and fucking must have had 20 lobster tails apiece. Whole soup bowls full of fucking melted butter. God, I thought I was in heaven. God, that shit was good.
That does
Those little lobster tails were about
sound
that.
heavenly, doesn't
Oh,
it?
yeah, it was all Southerners fucking eating that shit like it was crawfish. We were loving it.
I could eat my fucking weight in lobster.
Brothers was like, man, you eating that? It looks like a bug. It's like, man, come over here and eat this, man.
It is a bug.
You're like, oh, I would never eat that. It looks like a roach.
Delicious bug.
Brothers wouldn't eat it. Unless they were Southern.
Like I said, I could eat my own weight in lobster and or shrimp.
Yeah, I fucking love it. Makes me want to go get some shrimp.
Maybe we should go tomorrow and get some shrimp.
We can get some shrimp. We can get some shrimp.
We'll go see Halloween Kills tomorrow, or we're going to get
Stop by Sam's and get one of them big old fucking bags of shrimp for fucking $20. And fucking
I mean, they usually have a sale.
Get $30 big old fucking several fucking 2 pound, fucking 3 pounds of fucking shrimp. Commercial grade fucking bags of shrimp. I'll cook that bitch up fucking with some potatoes. I got those red potatoes, and we'll throw some fucking corn.
Yeah, we'll get some corn.
Corn cobs in there. Have a fucking crawfish. Have a fucking shrimp boil.
Okay.
I'll make the. Man, you're trying to get me fat again. That's all protein. I'll tell you what. As long as you don't eat the vegetables, it's all protein. But I'll make the fucking cocktail sauce and everything.
Yeah, it'd be good.
Cause I got that prepared horseradish.
All right.
I got that already. See, that's how it happens, people.
That's how fat happens.
That's how it happens. Well, no, it's you start fantasizing and then you start planning, and then the shit happens. The next thing.
All I've had today was 3 fish tacos.
Either that, or we'll go to Koi Wan. We'll go to Koi Wan.
That's what I thought you meant.
Maybe we'll go to Koi Wan and just eat the fucking all you can eat fucking.
Because then there
buffet.
won't be leftovers.
That's probably a better way to do it. That's a cheaper way to do it. Just go to Koi Wan and eat those all you can eat shrimp.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
All right. So what was I talking about? Okay.
I don't remember.
League of Incest.
League of Incest. That's awesome. That
is
name.
incest. Like I said, it sounds like a bunch of like a tribe of like supervillains.
Yeah, the League of Incest.
Yeah.
They knew how to troll back then.
So Lord Byron, so he's staying in Switzerland at this villa, right? And even before Percy and Mary and Claire got there, I think there was like a reputation. So you'd have like tourists, you'd have like locals in the area. They were like looking at the villa like through telescopes and shit like that, hoping they'd see like some orgies and whatnot. Because they thought I'm sure it wasn't as exciting as they were imagining, but they thought all kind of like crazy fucking orgy shit was going on in there, and they just wanted a glimpse of that. Yeah, I was just saying, I'm sure there was probably like, I'm sure they were all like on fucking opium and shit. I'm sure there was fun shit going on in there because Lord Byron did, like I said, he was a hit with the ladies, and he had kind of like a hippie commune kind of vibe going on there, like younger people in the area. He was famous, and he had money, so so people would come there and they would hang out. He had drugs. So everybody would like come there and hang out, and they'd like, do drugs, do opium, whatever, and probably get freaky. So I can kind of understand why he got that reputation, but I don't know if it's as exciting as people were like making it out to be. Like it was like the worst thing in the world, but everybody was like trying to get a glimpse of that shit. So it was like, that's very, very funny. So there's all kind of rumors like going around. So hilarious.
Con says, what is this, the 13 o'clock emancipation? Dude, that's what I'm doing, man. I'm emancipating, I'm proclamating up in here. In the middle of the fucking show.
He's emancipating all of you. If you
I'm getting ready to emancipate and proclamate up in here. Go ahead. Just like that fucking judge from fucking Idiocracy. Remember him?
Sort of.
We're going to get a ruling up in here. That's fucking funny.
So, yeah. So, as maybe anybody that knows the story, so Lord Byron had a friend / physician, personal physician, named John Polidori, who was also staying there. I'm sure this doctor, he was a doctor, but also he was kind of like, I kind of feel like maybe drug supplier, hanger on. He was that kind of dude as well. Drugs. So an opium was legal at the time. I don't know if it was like real respectable, but it was legal.
It was okay.
You could get it. You could get it.
All drugs were okay.
And like I said, I'm kind of reading, because I'm rereading Drood, which took place of a decade or two later than this. And even though it's a fictional story, it's period accurate. And laudanum was kind of seen as, it was a little bit illicit, but it was legal. So it wasn't like acceptable necessarily, but a lot of people did it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was kind of like had this weird kind of...
That was morphine, right? Morphine mixed with something else, I think, right?
Well, laudanum was kind of like opium. You would put opium in wine.
Okay.
In the novel Drood, which is about Wilkie Collins, who was a real dude. He was a real novelist.
Made wine stronger.
And he would, apparently, like, what you were supposed to do was you were put a couple drops of opium in your wine. So it was kind of like, opium and alcohol mixed together. But Wilkie Collins, he had like gout and stuff because he was kind of like, he was kind of an obese dude later in his life. And so he would drink like glasses of the shit, which was way more than was like of opium, liquid. Yeah. So he would just like drink like 2 or 3 glasses a day.
Yeah.
Which is way more than the recommended.
So he's heroin junkie level.
Yeah. Because he was like, apparently he justified it, at least in the novel, by saying that like he was in pain all the time because of the gout. Yeah. And so that was the only thing that would make the pain go away.
He'd feel pain when he sobered up because he was fucking hurting for that fucking opium.
That's, probably. I'm sure it exacerbated.
I feel much better now.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. For 3 glasses of the shit, which normally, I mean, to a normal dude, if you hadn't like built up a tolerance, that would like kill you. But yeah, so opium, laudanum, big kind of thing at the time. So basically what happened, so Lord Byron is staying in Switzerland on in Villa Diodati, which I believe is still there, on Lake Geneva. And as I said, tourists in the area trying to like look in the windows, trying to get a glimpse of some orgies or something. I don't know if they ever saw anything, but Now, so he invites Percy Shelley, Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin. Like I said, she was not Mary Shelley at this point legally, and Claire Claremont to stay with him over the summer of 1816. Now, at first, I think there's like a misconception that they were actually all living at the Villa Diodati. That's not actually the case. Percy, Mary, and Claire were actually staying at they rented another house nearby, which is called the Maison Chapuis. But they would go over to the Villa Diodati. And the Claire, at this point, was getting the dickin' from Lord Byron and possibly became pregnant at this point, sometime around this time, too. So she was one of Lord Byron's many conquests, I suppose.
Is that top chats or is that full chats?
That is... Let's see. It looks like...
top chat. No, go to live chat. There you go, live chat.
Okay, there we go.
Get everybody in there, because I noticed there wasn't too many chats going.
Yeah. Well, it's not always... Yeah, that was just kind of what came up. Now, the summer of 1816, if you don't know, was called the Year Without a Summer. What had ended up happening was that in the spring of the previous year, in April of 1815, there was a big-ass volcano, Mount Tabora, which is in present-day Indonesia. At the time, it was the Dutch West Indies. So it erupted, and this was actually the largest volcanic eruption in recorded history since 180 BCE. So this is a big one. they call it, I guess they have a volcano explosivity index. Explosivity, I love that.
Yeah.
Index. It goes up to 8. This one was a 7, so it was a big one. So it blew up. 12,000 people approximately in the immediate vicinity of the volcano were immediately killed.
Immediately killed 12,000 people.
And this volcanic eruption had worldwide impact, because basically the soot, all the shit from the volcano essentially blocked out the sun for a long time afterwards, and so caused global temperatures to plummet, which obviously made a lot of like crops fail, and like they had a bunch of other
now here's the fucking
effects.
weird thing, man. You got to put this shit in perspective. It's been a while since I read it, but if I remember correctly, that singular eruption put out more carbon into the atmosphere than the entire 20th century all in one day. That's like
it may have, I'm not sure, but like I said, it was a massive volcanic explosion. Massive.
They're like, fucking a lot of people word it. Basically, it dwarfed industry. And evidently they're kind of regular. And if fucking Yellowstone blows, it'll be fucking worse.
Well, we were talking about that on the How to Survive a Catastrophe show, and Zach was talking about that, I think, that was one of the things he worried about, because that's kind of overdue. If that blew, we'd be fucked.
Yeah,
it would be something like this.
But y'all need to like sit back and relax. Man ain't shit compared to nature, and events like this have been going on since the history of fucking the planet. This gigantic eruptions and fucking asteroid impacts and fucking solar flares. That's what you really have to worry about. If we get
nature's gonna like ass rape you.
Nature will ass rape you much worse than any of these fucking.
I worry about that more than what stupid ass people do.
Yeah,
honestly.
These ecological disasters. No, fucking no, man. If Yellowstone blows, it's not saying that we're toast. It's just that you'll be on a different planet for your lifetime.
It will be not fun.
It'll be cold for your lifetime.
And honestly, like this eruption, Sheila Ann asked, it's Mount, what's it called? Mount Taboro, something like that. Yeah, in what's now Indonesia. Yeah, it blew. And like I said, this was the worst volcanic eruption since 180 BCE.
Yeah.
Or CE rather, not BCE. So, like I said, a bad one. For, several thousand years, there hadn't been one like that. Killed 12,000 people immediately. And then pretty much for a year, more than a year afterward, kind of fucked up the weather. Because all of the shit that was in the air, like I said, blocked out all the sunlight, which has a lot of, domino effects. Like crops can't grow, the temperatures drop, everything's really cold.
They had like a couple of winters. Yeah.
Yeah. So 1816, very famously called the year without a summer, for that very reason, because the summer of that year, 1816, which, like I said, was more than a year after the volcano erupted, was basically really cold, and it just like fucking rained, and it was just cloudy and dark like the whole time. It was like super gloomy.
Yeah.
Which, unprecedented. It was like a crazy, and which led to like I said, a bunch of other things down the line. There were tsunamis, obviously, in the immediate aftermath.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of deaths after that because of the crops failing, because of freezing temperatures in, the summer when no one was expecting it.
Yeah.
All kind of fucking crap. There's all kind of famine and stuff that happened.
Now,
later
because
on.
this is kind of a paranormal fucking mystery, unsolved mystery, and true crime show, I must mention, because this is now something we're touching on this topic, there's a possibility that the legend of fucking Atlantis may have been because of a fucking volcanic eruption known as the end of the Minoan civilization. They had a damn island blow up, very much the same way that had the Minoans living on it. And the Egyptians may have remembered that as the end of Atlantis. Very plausible.
Well, I kind of feel like, as much as I think that, like, the myth of Atlantis, that's obviously, like, it's a super, like, advanced civilization that disappeared beneath the waves. Obviously, that's bullshit. But I do think that it's possible that it was based in reality. It is probably based in reality. Like you said, a volcanic eruption like took down like an island civilization.
Yeah.
And then people, just exaggerated it over the years.
The Egyptians said that they were super advanced. They're getting that information handed down to them, to people who are less advanced than the Egyptians. Okay? So everything is about perspective. It was just a civilization.
Yeah.
People thought it was advanced in comparison to them.
Well, and
I
people,
don't think they were as advanced as the Egyptians.
People tend to blow stuff out of proportion. Like, and the more like the story goes on, like as the years go on,
bigger and bigger and
yeah,
bigger.
then people just like add more details and stuff like that. So I'm not saying that. Well, it's just kind of like we were talking about this before, like the whole fucking biblical flood story, which was based on a story that was from the Epic of Gilgamesh, like thousands of years before that. But we're not saying that wasn't based on. I think that was based on probably like a small, relatively local event.
Yeah.
But it just got like conflated into this big like global shit over the years.
Some people have thought that the Epic of Gilgamesh, i.e. the flood story, may have been based on that damn same end of the Minoan civilization.
It might have been.
It might have been that same
because
thing.
Like I said, to people of that time, it would have seemed like a massive fucking deal.
Massive thing throughout and it's being passed down to the surviving civilizations.
And people are going to add their own details to it. And it's going to get bigger and bigger.
They're going to put their own gods into
in people's imagination. Sure, that's just what happens. That's legend building. That's what humans do.
You got a super chat.
Thank you, Zach. Volcanoes are some of the most fascinating, beautiful, and scary things to I can't see the whole thing, to me, and I can say I lost 20K in property when Kilauea erupted in 2018. Yeah, volcanoes, scary. Like I said, and you brought up Yellowstone like erupting, and that's kind of probably we should worry about that.
What could be worse though, asteroid impact.
Well, yeah, that would obviously be worse.
People don't realize that asteroids go nuclear, and if it's big enough, extremely nuclear enough. Look what they did to the dinosaurs. Even though that didn't all happen in one day, over time it kind of changed the dinosaur forever into birds.
And that asteroid was only about the size of a bus.
Yeah. So you just...
Which is kind of scary to think about.
And here's the thing. They hit regularly.
Yeah, all the time.
In geological... In a geological scale, they hit regularly. It's just that we don't live very long, so it seems like a long time. Every few 20, 30 million years, a big one hits.
Yeah. And like I said, it doesn't really have to be all that big.
No.
The one that wiped out the dinosaurs, like I said, it wasn't immediate. It happened over a while. But the one that they thought it was about the size of a city bus.
If a dinosaur one hit us, that'd be the end of your civilization.
Yep.
And most of your population would be dead.
Yep.
It'd be
Not immediately.
It would take a few years.
It would probably wipe out a lot of people immediately.
Yeah.
But it would take a while to get...
Yeah, because civilization can't start struggling under new environmental conditions. Power production becomes difficult. Economies start to suffer. You just can't support a modern-sized civilization. They start starving. They start killing each other. Fucking warlords emerge to fight. Becomes warlike things. 300 years later, you have 10% of the population. That's just how it goes.
Yep. Well, yeah, and so it's interesting to me that this is really, I don't know, this is something that always struck me about the story, is that this volcanic eruption, which happened essentially half a world away from Switzerland, had such an impact on our culture just because of something that probably nobody was thinking about at the time. Because of this volcanic eruption, which killed all these people and had this enormous environmental impact, which caused the summer of 1816 to be not a summer at all because of the weather. It so happened that because Lord Byron, Mary Shelley, Percy Shelley were staying at Villa Diodati, and normally they would do outdoor shit like you would do if you were spending summer somewhere. They would go out on the boats and go out on walking excursions and stuff. But they couldn't do any of that stuff because it was really cold and it just fucking stormed and rained the whole summer. So they were essentially confined to the indoors for extended periods of time. So they needed to find some ways to amuse themselves. So what they did was, allegedly, doing a bunch of opium and shit like that, because you do, having a bunch of philosophical discussions. And they started reading to one another and, in particular, telling each other ghost stories. Now, they started reading from a collection of German horror stories which have been translated into English, English title being Phantasmagoriana. So they were reading to each other from that. So while they're reading it, and you have to think too that there was a bunch of like sexual tension going on at this time too, because you have like Percy and Mary, they're not married yet at this point, but they're kind of like, they have a thing. Mary is still kind of grieving because of the death of her child. Also, Percy is probably likely fucking Claire as well. Byron is also fucking Claire. So there's all this kind of like, there's all this free love kind of shit flying around. So there's all kind of like shit going on. And like I said, drugs, ghost stories, who knows? And they're trapped inside. They can't go outside. So it's kind of like a lot of tension going on at the time. So there's also allegedly, I don't know if this is the case or not, but this is something that I read at a couple of sources. John Polidori, who was Byron's physician, also apparently kind of had the hots for Mary, and she was not having it. So there was that kind of shit going on too. So there was that. Also, Percy Shelley seemed like he was going back into drama queen mode again, and that he was just feeling very like oppressed and closed in and whatever. So they start reading to each other from all these ghost stories. The atmosphere is getting all kind of creepy. Everybody's like drugged up. It's like there's all this kind of, it was like a goth party gone horribly, horribly wrong. So one night in particular, Lord Byron starts reading from Samuel Taylor Coleridge's very famous poem, Christabel.
He also did Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
He did as well. Yeah. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And actually, I believe that Mary Shelley, her family knew Samuel Taylor Coleridge. If I might be remembering that
shout
wrong.
out to fucking Iron Maiden.
Yeah, he did do Rime of the Ancient Mariner.
Yeah.
He's very, very famous. So, so they started reading Christabel. And so the whole thing about Christabel is that it's kind of like a supernatural type of thing. There's kind of like this character in it called Geraldine, who is a woman, but is actually like like a lamia, which is kind of like that's like a witchy or like a flying
Lamia
serpent,
kind of like a dance,
like a vampire-ish, sort of like a supernatural kind of creature, kind of
a siren.
Yeah,
Kinda like
or like a snake, like almost like a Medusa. I want to say like a Medusa kind of. The kind of. It's that kind of thing. So it's like a supernatural, it's like a horror poem. So basically, Percy Shelley, like I said, drama queens, you guys. Percy Shelley apparently got really affected by this particular reading and started having these overwhelming visions of a woman who had eyes instead of nipples. Like eyes where her nipples would be.
Yeah.
And he was like super freaked out by this. And probably the opium was contributing. But also he like went into these like big like screaming fits about it. Like I said, dudes of this era, drama queens. They just couldn't handle it. They just couldn't even. Thinking about a woman with eyes instead of nipples, and he was just like, he just couldn't even, and he just started screaming.
Pookie's still in that damn.
Yeah, Pookie just curled up in the sink and went to sleep and was like, fuck it. So Percy Shelley is just like, apparently runs screaming from the room, according to some accounts. I don't know if he actually did this. I don't know if it was this dramatic or if he was just like, oh my God, I can't take it. But yeah, I can't take this vision anymore. So yeah, that's kind of freaked him out. Like I said, drugs probably didn't help. You know what I mean? So at this point, Lord Byron is like, okay, well, those stories are pretty scary, but I'm paraphrasing. Let's see, we're all writers, that more or less here. Let's see who can write the best ghost story. So he essentially proposed a contest. We're all going to come up with our own scary story, our own ghost story, and we'll see if we can do these ones one better. So let's see what we can come up with. So there's a whole fucking it's a whole fucking contest. Now, at this point, Mary Shelley, like I said, she's only 18 or 19 years old at this stage. And she is, sharing air with Percy Shelley, poet. Although, like I said, he's not as famous as he was nowadays, but he was still kind of well-known. Lord Byron, obviously a lot better well-known. So you know, she's kind of like I kind of feel like she felt like maybe she was a little intimidated. So she was kind of like, well, I have to come up with like the bestest ghost story ever. Like that's going to scare the shit out of, like, make them shit their pants because, you know, they're these big like literary geniuses and I'm just Mary Shelley. So I really need to come up with something fucking good. But it took her a really long time. She couldn't think of anything, right? And she was just like, and she kept saying, and she wrote about this like later on, I think it was like in the preface of like one of the later editions of Frankenstein, where she was saying that every morning, like at breakfast, they'd be like, oh, did you come up with anything yet? And she just couldn't think of anything. She just couldn't think of anything because she wanted it to be like really, really awesome. But she couldn't think of anything. Now, I will say though that I think maybe that she was the only person that took this whole ghost story contest thing like super seriously, because her shit was pretty much the only one that like survived. I mean, all of them survived obviously because all the people were famous, but hers was the only one that endured like throughout the ages. Although it could be argued that John Polidori's was, but he might have ripped his shit off from Byron. So I'll get into that a little bit later. So Mary Shelley, you know, she just like couldn't think of anything. Meanwhile, the thing that Byron wrote was he kind of started working on it. Like I said, I kind of feel like him and Percy sort of half-assed the whole situation. They did write some stuff, but it wasn't anything like earth-shattering. The thing that Byron wrote ended up being, to this day, it's either called Fragment of a Novel. I've also seen it called The Burial. But I will say, even though it's not even a whole story, like he didn't even fucking finish the thing, but it is one of the first vampire stories in English literature, interestingly, Byron came up with. But he didn't finish it. Now, interestingly, Polidori, who was his personal physician and hanger-on and drug supplier, allegedly, also allegedly took the idea from Lord Byron's unfinished story, which you can still read, like on Gutenberg and whatever, like public domain sites everywhere. He took that idea and turned it into essentially like a penny dreadful novel called The Vampire, with a Y, which many people have speculated was one of the inspirations for Bram Stoker's Dracula. So it could be that Lord Byron, in his sort of half-assed, I'm kind of writing a ghost story, but not really, because I'm not even going to bother to fucking finish the thing. But he wrote a vampire story, which was one of the first ones in the English language, which John Polidori then allegedly ripped off and made like a very popular penny dreadful about it, which again, Bram Stoker probably read, because everyone did, and later turned into Dracula. So could be that indirectly this gathering also led to Dracula. Could be. So, you know, we're saying. And also, the main vampire in Polidori's The Vampire, Lord Ruthven, was probably based on Byron. So, you know, there's that whole thing. I've actually read the fragment, and it's, you know, it's pretty good. But yeah, it's a vampire story. Percy Shelley half-assed it even more. The only shit he came up with, at least, I think he wrote some other shit during this time period too, because they were there the whole summer. But the only thing that he came up with, I think, in regards to the ghost story contest was something called A Fragment of a Ghost Story, which was essentially like an 8-line poem, which, like I said, you can still read on Wikipedia or whatever. But again, very half-assed. So, So Mary was kind of the only one that sort of took it seriously. And so she like overthought it. Because that's, you know, that's how she did. So she's like, okay, well, I have to come up with something really, really good. But she couldn't think of anything for a really long time. But then one night, you know, a few days after the challenge had been posed, she had a very, you know, in hindsight, very famous nightmare. She had a nightmare in which, and this is the quote that she came up with, and she wrote this in later editions of Frankenstein. This was the dream that she had. She said, when I placed my head on the pillow, I did not sleep, nor could I be said to think. My imagination, unbidden, possessed and guided me. I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then upon the workings of some powerful engine, saw signs of life. So she had a nightmare about a dude building somebody out of corpses and bringing it to life. Because, like I said, that was kind of an idea that she'd been fascinated with, like, pretty much throughout her entire life. And like I said, there was all this kind of, like, galvanism and all that kind of stuff going on, like bringing corpses back to life. And that was something that obsessed her. I don't know if I'd say obsessed her, but it was, like, something that she was interested in. And like I said, it could be, too, that because, her first baby had died, maybe that even, like, kind of strengthened her interest, because she was kind of like, well, she was interested in, like, bringing the dead back to life, obviously.
I got a delivery at the front door.
Oh, okay. Oh, I wonder what that is at this time of night.
No, it's from earlier today.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say it's 8:30. So she has this horrible nightmare. But to her credit, she wakes up the next morning and she's like, "Ooh, all right, I got an idea. I got a really good idea for a story." And she's gonna base it on this fucking nightmare about a dude. Like, I think her dream was kind of more like an alchemist type of thing, but, like, yeah, putting a body together of corpses and, like, bringing it to life. So she started writing a short story. Now, essentially, that's all this was going to be. I don't know, because, like I said, she was only about 19 at this time. So I don't know if she wanted anything more than just writing a scary ghost story that would impress Shelley and Byron, because she wanted, I don't know, I kind of feel like she wanted to impress them because she felt like they were maybe, I mean, she had written before, but she wasn't a writer, she'd never been published or anything, and she was very young still. So I kind of feel like she was kind of on the hook to, okay, you want me to wait till you're done, or you're making a lot of noise?
Sorry. Okay. That's it.
Okay.
Handlebar weights.
Oh, okay. So I kind of feel like there was a lot of pressure on her to kind of come up with something. And when she had this dream, she's like, okay, well, I'm going to write a story about this. But I don't know, because I kind of feel like at the point she just wanted to, like, write a scary story. So I don't know if she actually had any ambitions for it other than it just being like a scary short story, because that's all it was, like, to start with. Now, interestingly, like I said, a lot of themes of her life, if you read Frankenstein and you read her biography, you can kind of see a lot of her, like, the shit that happened in her life, like, coming out in the story. One thing that comes out a lot in Frankenstein is that she really believed, she had similar views to her parents, but I think her parents were, like, a lot more individualist than her. She was kind of more, she was an individualist too, but she was much more into, like, the rights of women and their compassion, and that compassion was kind of be like humanity's savior type of thing, and that was going to be, and that was going to come mostly from women. So she was also a big advocate of every child that's born should be wanted and loved. So I kind of feel like one of the main things in Frankenstein is, and one of the main sins of Dr. Frankenstein, is that he creates something, and he's a man, so he can't have a baby. So he has to, like, cobble something together out of corpses and bring it to life. And then when it doesn't do what he wants, he abandons it. Like, he abandons his creation. And to her, that was kind of like, that seemed like the main sin, that he had abandoned what he had made.
What she's talking about.
Because that was like her child, like his child.
Talking about those orphans out of wedlock is what they're talking about.
Yeah.
The orphanages. Makes sense.
So yeah, that's the kind of thing. And it's just kind of like, and Dr. Frankenstein is portrayed as, I mean, he's kind of like a villain. And honestly, the monster is portrayed more sympathetically. The monster is only a monster. She calls him a creature at first. He's only a monster because people treat him badly because he looks fucked up. And so her big thing in the novel was that if you treat people badly, they're going to lash out. So it's almost kind of like she doesn't really, in the text, she seems to, like, not blame the monster for his, and the monster seems to say this too. He's like, look, I'm only, like, doing all this fucked up shit and killing people because everyone was, like, shitty to me, which that was kind of like one thing that you like, look, you treat people shitty, they're going to be shitty. You know what I mean? You
like Carl Panzeran.
Yeah. So it's, so yeah, that was, so she was kind of like, kind of making a statement about that. And like I said, it was also kind of a thing where she was almost, I don't know if she was villainizing Dr. Frankenstein for trying to I don't know. She was kind of like atheistic, so I don't think she was like Dr. Frankenstein, like usurping God's power, but it's almost kind of like he was usurping the power of life because he couldn't give birth to a child, so he just like made one out of corpses. And then when it did some fucked up shit, he like abandoned it, or he, you know what I mean? He wouldn't like take care of it. As soon as he saw like quote unquote how monstrous it was, it didn't come out the way he wanted. Like, it wasn't beautiful like he thought it would be.
Well,
so he's like, man, fuck that shit.
As a man, you can't physically make other people. But
Yeah.
you can make machines. Men love machines. You build a fucking motorcycle.
I wonder if there's something to that. That's really interesting.
Well, yeah, of course there is.
Because you can't, like, create...
You can't create it, so you create
life.
machines, and you create systems, and you create this and that. So, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so there was a lot of that. So I kind of feel like Mary probably put a lot of herself or a lot of her own sympathies into the creature, because even though he kills people and shit like that, I mean, he only does that because he's ostracized, because he's monstrous. So, and I think, like I said, one of the things I think that's something that the movies got right is that they made him, even though he kills people, he's still like sympathetic, because everyone's so shitty to him that you understand, because he just, he just wants to be himself, And then there's the whole thing too where he asked Dr. Frankenstein to make him a bride because he's alone, and then Dr. Frankenstein's like, oh, okay, and he thinks about it, and basically he's like, well, I'm gonna kill everybody in your family if you don't make me a bride. But then he doesn't do it, so then the monster just like kills everybody just like he said he was going to.
Yeah, it's like something out of a damn Morrissey album.
It is kinda. But yeah, so you can really see, I mean, like I said, this is...
I am the sun and the air.
But yeah, so as I said, so she just wrote this as a short story. Apparently, they thought it was really cool. Although, like I said, it kind of feels like by the time she finished the story, Byron and Shelley had kind of half-assed it. Like I said, Polidori wrote The Vampire, but that was later. Like, he kind of like expanded that out later from an idea that he allegedly ripped off from Byron. So that was kind of like later on. But like, yeah, Mary Shelley just wrote it as a short story at the time. So she probably didn't think all that much about it until a little bit later on. So at this point, so they spend the summer there. That shit happens. She writes the short story. Percy apparently like is really into it, and he's like really supportive. He's like, wow, this is really good. So then they go back to London, and she kind of continues writing, because apparently Percy said, hey, this is really good. You should expand this into a novel, because at the time it was only like a short story. So she started working on that. Now at this point, they still have the baby, William. And notably, in the novel Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein has a younger brother, also named William, who, spoiler alert, the monster kills later on. So basically, when they go back to London, Mary's older half-sister, Fanny, ended up committing suicide. Now, Mary was really, really upset about this, because Fanny, I guess she'd kind of always been like overshadowed by Mary, and Mary felt guilty that she could have done more to like be more in her life and like talk to her more, and she kind of felt like she'd neglected her, and she was like responsible for her killing herself. So that was like another death that she felt like was almost like on her hands, kind of, because like I said, even as a kid, she felt responsible for her mom's death because her mom had died like after she gave birth to her. So she's like, all these deaths are kind of like, she feels responsible for all of them. So her older half sister dies, and she feels responsible for that as well. She killed herself. Now Mary, also, I guess, like I said, Mary had kind of inherited this depressive temperament, I guess you'd call it, from her mom, because her mom had also attempted suicide a couple of times. She was very, she was suffered from depression as well, and Mary seems to have also suffered from that. And like I said, she seemed to feel very responsible for bad things that happened around her, which, like I said, that's very common for people with that temperament. 2 months later, after Fanny committed suicide, her half sister, Shelley's wife, Harriet, who he had abandoned, she was 21 at the time. She also killed herself. She actually jumped off a fucking bridge into the Serpentine, which is a lake in Hyde Park in London. She was 8 months pregnant So she had jumped off a thing because Shelley had abandoned her with some kids, left her all alone. And so she killed herself also. So Mary also, probably understandably, felt responsible for that as well. Shelley didn't really seem to give a shit because that's kind of how he rolled. So, you know. Shelley's story, I love this. Percy Shelley, I think one of the reasons that he was able to not feel bad about his wife, Harriet, because they were still, I guess, legally married at this point, even though he had run off with Mary, he didn't really seem to feel all that bad about it because he's like, oh, well, what happened with that was that after I left, she got, like, kicked out of her dad's house, and then she went and worked in a brothel, which I'm not entirely sure is true. And then she ran off with some other dude, and that other dude deserted her, and that's why she killed herself. So it totally wasn't me. That's kind of, yeah. So he's kind of like absolving himself of responsibility, which, like I said, typical of this type of dude. But, you know, like I said, I love
trying to get
I love your poems and everything, but, you know, he wasn't as big a shit as Lord Byron, but he was still kind of a shit.
Most of these dudes are just trying to get all this shit behind them so they can climb up into some more booty.
That's what I'm saying. They don't give a single goddamn fuck about anybody other than themselves and their own penises. Yeah. And they're basically
Look
like
at how women want to put it. Like,
I'm just saying that's kind of like
man's on a mission. You know, a man's on a mission. He's just trying to get through life and have a good time, and he doesn't want to hear any of this drama.
Well, like I said, because they don't have to like bear any of the brunt of the fallout of their actions.
They try not to, yeah.
Well, yeah, they just want to do shit without consequences. And a lot of times, and particularly during this time period, they didn't really have to bear any of the consequences. No. So they didn't really worry about it.
No, the man mafia was in charge.
Right. So his wife basically jumped off a bridge, 8 months pregnant, and drowned herself.
Damn.
And so he was basically like, well, some other dude abandoned her, and so it wasn't my fault. That's kind of what his story was.
Yeah, it made excuses for it.
Yeah. Right. So at this point, like, Mary still has William, their son. And at this point, too, she's also pregnant with a third one. Claire, at this point, was pregnant, too. They're not sure. This is probably Byron's kid, but it could have been Shelley's kid. No one's entirely sure. Most people think it was probably Byron's kid because they were fucking at this point. I think like Percy and Claire were probably fucking too, but most people agree this is probably Byron's kid that she was pregnant with at this point. But Byron was like, no, it was totally Shelley. So like I said, everybody's trying to like absolve themselves of responsibility. They want free love, but they don't want the consequences of it.
All right,
is what I'm saying.
Would you?
Well, I'm a woman, so it's like I know there are consequences. I'm not stupid enough to think that
there. Would you select no consequences?
To think there aren't any consequences. If you could just select
consequences, it goes no consequences. You select that.
Well, everybody would do that, but like I said, that's not how the world works. Right. And like I said, because I'm a woman, I understand that there are consequences of things.
You're saying men don't understand the consequences?
They don't really seem to. I mean, they act as if they don't. They act as if they don't.
We know.
Because they don't have to like do anything. So like I said, they don't have to like get fat and like for 9 months and do all that shit. So you know.
Well, you can get the pill, you know what I mean, and you can fucking
but that doesn't work. That doesn't work all the time though. That's not 100%. Nothing's 100% effective except for abstinence, and nobody wants that. Fuck's sake.
Okay.
So yeah. So basically, what happens is that at this stage, because Mary and Percy had a kid, and even though Percy was kind of dead set against marriage in principle, and Mary was not a big fan of it, I mean, at least in principle, like I said, they figured, well, probably we should get married at this point, because if we have any more kids, it's like in case there's like custody issues, there was legal issues, so they thought probably they should get married. So like I said, at this point, they actually did get married. So during the whole like summer of 1816, they were not actually married, but they did actually marry like later that year, even though they were technically both against it. But like I said, for legal reasons, they decided to. Now, when they got married, interestingly, Mary's dad, who, like I said, they'd kind of been estranged for a couple of years since she had run off with Percy. So he actually did come to her wedding, and they actually did like reconcile after this. Although their relationship, I don't think, was ever as close as it had been prior to that, because I kind of feel like he thought maybe she like disappointed him, and it was kind of like that sort of thing, but he was sort of happy about it, so they kind of like made up, so that was nice. So she kind of got back into her like dad's good graces or whatever. So yeah, so they get married in late 1816. Now, interestingly though, it's kind of like, so summer of 1817, which was like a year later, as I said, Frankenstein started out as like a short story, but because Percy thought it was really good and like sort of encouraged her, like, hey, why don't you make it a whole novel? So summer of 1817, Mary Shelley finishes it. Now, because women were not really, I mean, nobody really wanted to read anything that was written by a woman. So a lot of women writers went by male pseudonyms or published things anonymously or under other people's names or things like that, which, you know, wasn't discovered until much later. So what ended up happening was that she published it in January of 1818 anonymously. But because there was a preface, which was written by Percy Shelley, and it was dedicated to William Godwin, who was Mary Shelley's father, everyone assumed that Frankenstein had been written by Percy Shelley. Because, like I said, nobody knew really all that much about Mary Shelley. Like I said, women were not really...
I got to give a shout out, though.
What's that?
Because this reminds me of another story.
What's that?
There was this old black and white movie called The Ghost and Mrs Muir. Remember that? It's a love story between a living woman and a damn ghost. He was a fucking man of the sea. And part of the fucking story is he was a dick at first, but they kind of fucking had this relationship going on with this ghost. And he ghost writes a story to her about his tales of the sea. And they had, I believe, they had to publish that under a male pseudonym.
A lot of women did back then.
Yeah. But she was able to make enough money to buy the house.
Yeah.
Which used to be his house. Have you guys never seen that old black and white movie called
That's a good movie. I liked it.
Ghost and Mrs Muir. I haven't mentioned it on the show ever before. Badass flick. It's a good fucking ghost movie, but also kind of like a romantic drama. Pretty cool. Tear jerking at the end.
Don't spoil it.
Yeah, no.
I remember that movie.
Good movie.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it in a long time. We gotta watch that again.
We should actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a classic.
Classic.
But yeah, that was something that happened a lot. Like women did write novels, obviously, but they usually published anonymously or under a male pseudonym. That's kind of how you got around the shit. So yeah, even though she published it anonymously, everyone just assumed that Percy Shelley had written it because he was kind of like well known. He was a man, and he had written the preface. Now, it was only much later that it came out, like that Mary Shelley had actually written it. Now, even to this day, scholars still debate how much influence Percy Shelley had over the novel. Although I will say that there were, I guess, like there's a collection in England that had like this, like the original manuscript, and it actually has like Percy Shelley's like notes and shit. And apparently, basically what his role was, he was just like a line editor, pretty much. He just like went through the story and like made little corrections and shit like that. So I don't think that he really had all that much influence over the final story. I think that was mostly her. But, you know, he just basically did like little editorial shit. So, you know, there's that whole thing. Because I kind of feel like for a long time people were like, oh, Percy Shelley actually wrote it or whatever. He did not. She wrote it. He just did like some editing duties. Now at first, they only printed 500 copies, which doesn't sound like a lot, but those 500 copies apparently fell into the hands of very, very like influential, like all the kind of big literary lights of the time. Everybody was reading this shit. As soon as it came out, it was kind of like a sensation. You have to think that this was like essentially the first, I don't know if it was the first, but it was like the first widespread science fiction story. Really.
Sci-fi horror.
Yeah. And so it was something that a lot of people, it's not like completely original because nothing is, but it's kind of like they hadn't really seen anything like this before. So as soon as it came out, even though it was very, very limited edition, all of the people, like influential people in society were reading it. Like everybody was reading this shit and everybody was talking about it, like in the literary circles and stuff. So it was like an immediate sensation pretty much. So basically it's kind of like, all right. So at this point, The book's doing well. As far as I know, I don't think anybody at this point knows that Mary Shelley wrote it yet. It's just still like anonymous. People are assuming it's Percy Shelley. Nobody's really saying anything about it. Mary has another baby, a baby girl named Clara. And at this point, too, Claire Claremont also gives birth to a kid who is probably Byron's. And this is a daughter named Allegra. She was actually named Alba at first, but then they called her Allegra later on.
Happiness.
You're happy. You got your...
Allegra means happiness.
It does. So, yeah.
Or happy.
So at this...
They tell me to put the fucking mullet on.
So okay. Tom put the mullet on. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. You do look nice in the mullet.
Yeah.
You look like Joe. You look like Joe Dirt.
Yeah. Get ready to see some country western music and shit.
Okay. Well, you can soon. Like I'm almost to the bottom.
Okay.
I'm almost to the bottom. So, all right. So at this point, they go to Italy after Claire has the kid, because Claire, however misguidedly, thinks, well, I'm going to here's our daughter, like me and Byron's daughter. So I'm going to take our daughter to Byron, and I don't know what she was expecting. But as I said before, Lord Byron, kind of a dick. Apparently what happens, they go to Italy, which is, where Byron was living at the time. And basically Byron writes a letter and says, yeah, I'm going to send somebody to collect, quote unquote, the brat. And I'm just going to take the kid, and Claire should never see me or speak to me or see the kid ever again.
Damn.
So, a little bit of a dick, just saying. So Byron essentially takes Allegra from Claire, the mother, and pokes her in a convent. A baby. Puts her in a convent. Allegra ended up dying 5 years later. Probably of typhus. Maybe malaria. Not entirely sure. Yeah.
Eating that shit water.
That was nice.
Yeah.
So he didn't want the baby. He just took the baby away from her and stuck it in a convent. And said, you're not allowed to see the baby anymore, just for whatever reason, because I'm a douche and whatever. So, that's nice. So.
Dude's a dick.
Yeah, he's a giant dick. Now, at this point, so Percy Shelley, for whatever reason, is still friends with this douche. Because like I said, Percy Shelley was kind of a douche, too. He was just like a lesser douche. In the douche, taxonomy of douches, he's like a lesser douche. It's hard to be as much of a douche as Lord Byron, but yeah, so Shelley was kind of up there too. So they're kind of still hanging out together. So him and Claire go and stay with Lord Byron in Padua, where he was staying in Italy. Now, Mary, at this point, like I said, she had another baby at this point named Clara, and the baby was sick. But Mary took, because she kind of took a coach journey. She didn't take ship or anything, but overland. And it was a long journey, and they were both kind of sick, but she went there to join them. But 3 weeks after arriving to see Byron, Clara, the baby, also died of dysentery.
Damn.
So how many is this? This is as many as
Drinking more of that shit water.
Goodness.
They didn't know about clean water back then.
I guess not. Everybody's fucking babies, dropping fucking dead. I can't believe. I don't know. I guess it's fucking. No wonder fucking Mary was fucking depressed all the time. Holy crap! Every baby she's had is fucking died. So she's had it. So obviously she's very upset. But the book Frankenstein is going gangbusters, man. Everybody's everybody's reading this shit. Everybody's talking about it. Even back then, only a year or two after it was published. People talk about now, the Universal horror movie cycles and stuff, and how, they made the serious ones and then they made, the funny ones and shit like that. Even back then, they were doing stage adaptations of it that were, comedies. So, it was only, a year or two after it was published. So, it was, a massive, cultural sensation, even at the time. So, so that's nothing new. So yeah, everybody's fucking reading this. It's all over the fucking cultural zeitgeist of the time. And also, so like I said, she still has, this is 1819, Mary still has her son, William, who, like I said, she loves more than anybody, because, like I said, her other two kids have died. But, sadly, God, this is so fucked up. William also started to get sick around this time, gets a fever. And he basically ended up dying also. Malaria. He died of malaria at 3 years old. At this point, Mary is just, she can't fucking tell. I mean, understandably. Like I said, every kid she's had has died. And not just in, like, when they were babies, but sometimes when they were older. And she just, like, can't fucking take it anymore. And she starts getting to a point where she's depressed all the time. And she starts, according to, like, a lot of her friends and stuff, she basically starts, like, emotionally just shutting down. Everybody said she became very cold and very distant. Because, which, like I said, is very understandable because she's lost so many of the people that she loved that she's basically like, look, I'm just going to shut off all my emotions.
She can't control anything.
To keep, just to keep from just being wallowed in fucking grief all the time. Because that can't be fun for anybody.
How old is she at this point?
18, 19. She was like 20.
So real young still, yeah.
Yeah. So, like I said, it's fucking terrible. So... The thing about Percy, though, like I said, not as big a dick as Lord Byron, but still kind of a dick. All Percy worried about was he wasn't all like, honey, I understand your pain. You know, I'm there for you. I'm supportive. Because it was his kids, too. I mean, it's not like it was just her.
Right.
But he was basically more worried about, well, you're just a bummer to hang around with.
Right, yeah, you're a drag.
Yeah, that was basically this. He didn't say that, but like he wrote some poems. And I'm reading the poems that he wrote about her at this time period. And I'm like, dude, do you even care about anybody other than yourself? It's like all he cared about was, you're not the woman that you used to be. I'm like, yeah, can you blame her? Holy crap.
It's been through hell.
And it's just kind of like, that's all he cared about was, I just want that woman back, even though, like, he didn't really seem to care about the kids at all. And she really, like, that really resonated with her because it seemed like he was just, like, bouncing back, like, oh, well, kids are dead. Let's just, like, continue on.
Yeah, well, in those days,
and he expected her to do that, too, and she couldn't do that.
In those days, they did die a lot.
They did, but it's just kind of like...
But,
it's a little... cold to just...
I can understand kind of like both sides of that argument. You got a woman who's just devastated by all this fucking damage that has happened. They don't really know why children die at this point. So you might blame yourself. But they don't know that you can't drink dirty water.
Well, that's what I mean. Mary had the kind of personality that she would absolutely blame herself. Yeah. What did I do wrong? She blamed herself for her mother dying, even though she was only 11 days old.
You don't really know. There's no such thing as antibiotics or medical science as you know it. So you tend to probably think, well, God did this, or the universe did this, or So I can now the other guy. On the other hand. You ask me, he's a little bit sociopathic.
Yeah, that's the word I would use. That's the word.
He's kind of like, well, this shit happens, man. Fucking shake it off. We'll
deal with it.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it again.
And basically, all he worried about was, and he said this like in a more poetic language in one of the things, but he's basically saying, you're not getting my dick hard anymore.
Right, yeah, you're a
So
drag.
I'm losing interest.
Yeah.
Because, oh my gosh, you're sad because your baby's dying.
Well, you have to understand something. First of all, they're primitive people. This was a long time ago. They don't have full knowledge. They're also young. And they don't really understand the difference between the way it is in their time and the way it could be. They don't, you know what I mean? They don't know. It's fucked up, but they don't understand why it's fucked up, or how they play into that.
Yeah.
Therefore they probably tended to blame themselves.
Yeah, and like I said, this is a generalization, but when bad shit happens, women generally tend to be like, what did I do wrong to cause this? And Mary seems to have that exact personality. Right. Everything that happened, everybody that died, every bad thing that happened, she felt like personally responsible.
Well, the deaths
for not doing more.
The deaths that you're talking about are usually related to things like poor sanitation, bad water services.
Right, but they wouldn't have known.
They wouldn't have known.
Not really.
Okay. So.
I mean, she blamed herself for her older half sister committing suicide because she's like, why wasn't I there more? Why wasn't I there to support her? Why wasn't I could have helped her?
They did not know enough to really understand why mortality rate was high.
Yeah.
So it is kind of funny when you look back in a certain way, but it's just sad that people like this, and I would call these were not modern people. Okay, they just really weren't. They had modern thinking, but they're not in a modern situation. And yeah, they had high mortality. Nothing we can do about it now.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can just have some sympathy for them, like, yeah, well, it was outside of your hands.
Yeah.
But people are going to look at us like that too.
I mean, I feel bad for her, and honestly, I kind of wish Mary Shelley is one of those people that I wish I could go back in a time machine and like bring her to the modern era, and show her how much her work has impacted the culture, because maybe that would cheer her up a little bit. Because I kind of feel like she needed some cheering up.
I mean, it's the same thing with even later on. I mean, Friedrich Nietzsche fucking mentioned about the time when he was in the German scene, hanging out with this cool chick that he wanted to hit. And she was bubbly and fun, but she had TB. And, you know what I mean? She was coughing up blood. And, her days were numbered.
Yep.
And they didn't know what TB was, and they didn't have a cure for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, as soon as she went, blood came up, everybody's like, well...
Yeah.
Let's start making a coffin for you.
He said she was smart and cute as a bug. And didn't last long, though. She died.
A lot of people did.
And, you can kind of go back in time mentally and try to picture yourself, well, what would I have done, or what would that have been like? It would have been exactly what you're reading about. You'd have watched all these people get sick and die, or you'd have sit there helplessly.
Yeah, there wasn't anything you could do.
There's nothing you could do.
And like I said, because they weren't entirely cognizant of what was going on... Like I said, it would be very easy if you were already of that, personality or that bent that you would kind of blame yourself. Like, what could I have done to prevent that? Yeah. I kind of feel like they probably couldn't have in a lot of ways.
It's that same thing, though. These people, they didn't live very long back then, and that was just the way of things. Sad.
It is.
A lot of people went through it, but we can't help them.
That's what I mean. And it's like, it's so shitty that, like, people had to go through that and, like... live like this without knowing that like shit could be better.
Here's the good thing about it. Even if fucking, the world were to fall apart and fucking society were to collapse, it would not go back to that level because the knowledge is out there.
Well, yeah, like I'm saying. So I'm not really like super worried about everything going like back to caveman days.
No, it would never go back that far. It would go back society-wise or organizationally the 1800s. But the knowledge wouldn't go back to the 1800s. You'd still have technology. Guys would be making guns. There'd be computers. There'd probably be an internet. You'd have the knowledge. You'd know what dysentery was. You would know that to filter water, or to at least boil it. You know what I mean? Boil it and filter it if you can. But there would be an infrastructure, because everyone would demand it. If there'd be a city, you say, "Well, we're gonna have a fucking water supply."
Yeah, because like I said, everybody. I kind of feel like that knowledge has been disseminated.
It's been disseminated. It's too deeply inside mankind.
Yeah, everybody knows, hey, let's not drink shit water.
Right.
That's not a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everybody knows that nowadays.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Percy is basically like, why don't you get my dick hard anymore? The babies are dead, get over it. And she's just kind of like, what the fuck? Why is he such a douche? There was that kind of situation. So they move out to this house called the Villa Marini, which was kind of like out in the middle of nowhere. It was like a coastal type of place, which Shelley was like into that. He was like really into like the sea. He was seafaring, all that kind of stuff. So he was into it. Mary couldn't stand it. She thought it was horrible. So she was miserable again, like out there. But he didn't really give a shit about that because, he was all about Percy. So basically, what happened... So Mary has a fourth child at this point, which she named after him, sadly, Percy. Spoiler alert, this is the only child of hers that she had, of 5. I think she had 5. This was the only one that survived into adulthood. So Mary at this point, she's kind of like had some illness, and I think she's pregnant again at this point. She's only 24. So this is 1822. Percy, like I said, he's real into like seafaring. He's with boats and everything like that. So he has a friend, and they go out. He has this new sailboat called the Don Juan, and he goes out to visit Byron in Livorno, which was 65 miles away on the coast of Italy. So he goes off with his friend, and then nobody hears anything for many, many days. Mary is starting to freak the fuck out. Where did Percy go? So she goes, her and Claire go off to Livorno, where Byron was living, and they wait for him. What ended up happening, 3 days after they arrive there, a couple bodies wash up on the beach. One of them was Percy Shelley's. He died when he was 29 years old, so he was like swept off his boat in a storm, and he drowned. Mary Shelley was understandably, again, fucking devastated. She's 24, her husband is 29, and he's fucking dead. And she's seen his body wash up on the fucking beach. Basically, because she didn't really have to, like, bury anybody or whatever, because she, like, burned his body. They burned his body, like, on the beach where he was found. And she actually kept part of his heart. They found it, like, in her stuff, like, later on. She had, like, a lock of his hair and, like, a little bit of his heart that she had taken. And then, she had burned.
That's even unusual, even back in those days, by 24, to see so many deaths.
That's what I'm saying. It's just, like, yeah, it wasn't that crazy, because, like, yeah, babies and stuff died, and a lot of her babies died. Well, like I said, only one of her kids survived into adulthood.
Right.
But, yeah, her mom died in childbirth. Like, and Percy died when he was 29.
24 is still a baby.
That's still a baby. Which is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, the poor fucking woman.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy. So, yeah, so now Percy was dead, and she was, again, devastated. Now, interestingly, like I said, I feel like she doesn't get enough credit for her essentially being Percy's, like, PR person after he died. Because he was kind of known, like, in literary circles, but not, like, Lord Byron famous. And Lord Byron had actually never mentioned Percy, really, like, in any of his writings. And Mary asked him about that, was like, dude, what the fuck? And then she kind of made it, like, her life's mission to get all of his stuff published and get it out there. So it's arguable that would we even know who Percy Shelley was if it wasn't for her? And the weird thing is that for a long time afterward, Mary Shelley, probably up until the late 80s, at least in literary circles, was kind of known as, oh, that girl that wrote Frankenstein, oh, and Percy Shelley's wife. But like I said, the irony is I don't think Percy Shelley would be as well known for his verse if she hadn't advocated for his shit after he was dead. Because she was, like, instrumental in getting a lot of his shit published and edited. She edited all his stuff, like, later and all that stuff.
What's funny is that her personal story arc seems to end at about 24.
It didn't, though. She lived until she was 53, and she wrote, like, a bunch of shit after that.
Okay.
Which was not actually appreciated until much after she was dead. Okay. Everybody, like, was into Frankenstein. And that kind of, like, overshadowed a lot of her stuff. And like I said, she got overshadowed by Percy Shelley for a long time.
But how was it appreciated in the 1800s?
I kind of feel like...
Was she famous and we forgot
she kind of was. She made a living.
Right.
She was well known enough to, like, make a living from her writing.
Yeah, and to clarify to the audience, think about it. There were celebrities through the 18 and the 1900s that were famous as fuck in their days. You don't even know their names. Forgotten fame. Yeah. Actors that were forgotten.
Yeah.
Fucking, some of them were films, some of them were fucking stage actors. They were wildly famous. You would never even know. You wouldn't even recognize their names and authors. So was she something like that where in her lifetime or maybe like the generation after, was she famous in the 1830s?
I mean, I think she was 40s? She was well known in literary circles, yeah.
Yeah. Good. As much as you could be famous in those days.
Right,
there was no social media.
Yeah. So she was well known, yeah. And like I said, she was known enough to, like, make a living at it. And like I said, she wrote several novels, several plays, essays, nonfiction. She wrote all kind of shit, like, afterward. Because she lived quite a long time after Percy Shelley's death. Although she had some kind of, like, flirtations and relationships. And apparently, she was quite beautiful. So she did have a lot of gentleman callers and suitors and stuff like that afterward, but she seemed not super into it. It's like she had a lot of friendships with men later, but when she would have male suitors, a lot of writers and stuff like that, like, courted her, gave, like, marriage proposals.
Standard was set high.
She always kind of turned him down for that reason. Yeah. She was just kind of like, look, I was married to one genius. Unless you were of the same caliber as him, I'm not having it.
Right.
So there was that thing. Another thing she did too, and I don't know if a lot of people know this, but she was a big advocate. Like I said, her mom was, like, probably, like, the first, I don't know if she was the first feminist, but she was kind of like the founder of feminism. And so Mary Shelley was very into, she kind of put her money where her mouth was. She would help out women. One particular case, I was reading about it on her Wikipedia page, where there was a woman that she knew who was a lesbian, which was really not kosher at that time. and she helped that woman like escape to France with her lover. And they actually, like, she made it, like, legally so the lover was, like, a man, even though it was a woman. So she kind of, like, set it up so they could live as, like, husband and wife, even though they were both women. So she was, like, very ahead of her time in that regard. She was very into, like, helping women who were, you know, down on their luck or persecuted for whatever reason because of their alternative sexualities or whatever. So she actually did kind of do a lot of shit in that line. And she wrote a lot about that too, like later on. But
and that wasn't some rare shit either. There was a lot of women like that throughout history.
Well, it just wasn't super acceptable.
Going back to the Roman period.
Yeah.
And some of them were fucking bad too. You know, Countess Bathory, straight up fucking lesbian.
Well, she was a serial killer.
And a murderer.
Yeah. I don't know if she killed as many people as people attribute to her. What do they say? Like 600?
Who knows how much of that is true? But
yeah, I don't know.
Purportedly,
some of that might be haters. Like after she was dead. Right. It's hard to say.
Some have said it was all made up. They were just trying to steal her land, but
which could happen. I mean, that did happen. But
there were some there's some memoirs that she had left behind that the Romanians have in a vault, and there was some witness testimony. Though the investigators went there and said no, they were dead girls inside of cages and fucking bad shit.
Yeah, I'm not saying, and we did a show on her, but I was just kind of saying, I don't think she killed 600 people, but I'm not saying that she didn't kill anybody.
Probably, I remember that.
I think 600 is an exaggeration, but
I think it's an exaggeration.
I do think she was a serial killer.
50, 60, 70, probably.
Yeah, I mean, which is bad enough. Like I said, that's bad enough on its own. She was still absolutely a serial killer.
Yeah.
But I do think that people like exaggerated shit over the years.
Yeah.
But yeah, so basically, Mary Shelley, like I said, Percy died when she was 24, and she spent a lot of her time later. I mean, she made a living from her writing, so obviously she was famous enough for that. She was actually like able to make a living at it. She wrote a lot of novels. She actually wrote an apocalyptic novel called The Last Man in 1826. So again, kind of ahead of her time, just saying. And wrote a lot. She did like a lot of editing. Like I said, she edited a lot of collections of Percy's work. So the rest of her life, she really devoted a lot of her life to not only her own writing, but advocating for Percy's verse and whatever. So she did actually do a lot of that. She wrote like travel books, shit like that. So she kept herself busy. Also, like I said, very into her political causes, feminism, all that kind of stuff. And as I said, actually did help women on the ground that were trying to, like, you know, get out of fucking situations that were not acceptable at the time. So she did actually do that. And it's just interesting. So she ended up dying in 1851. She was 53 years old. Her physician suspected it was probably a brain tumor. She had suffered from pretty bad, like, ill health through the last few years of her life. You know, like I said, kind of a melancholy woman, but she did kind of, you know, like still be around in like society and stuff, but she didn't marry again. She didn't do any of that kind of stuff. She did kind of like have relationships, but yeah. And like I said, I think that Percy was her great love, and everybody else, she had a lot of male friends, but I don't think anything ever lived up to that for her.
Right.
And so she just wasn't having it. So, you know, there was that whole thing. But she's a really interesting person. I always found her an interesting person. But, yeah.
All right, well, I guess that's the end of the show. We covered it.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead and shut it down.
And I mean, just think about, but like I said, think about how just something she came up with because of a contest.
Right.
Is now like everybody knows that fucking book.
Well, being first has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. And think about how many fucking movies have been made about it. Think about look. I even have like a Frankenstein right there, like a little model of Frankenstein. I don't know if he still works.
Even though that character is not the same character that she was kind of talking about in the books.
No,
actually, it's not. There were several different interpretations of Frankenstein.
Well, in the novel, the monster, the creature,
kind of sympathetic.
He was sympathetic and he could talk.
Yeah, he was intelligent.
Like after a while, like he escaped and then like he found all these books and like he kind of like hung out with people and like he learned to talk and he was really like articulate.
From what I remember, the fucking the Robert De Niro version was closer to what I remember in the book.
Yeah, that actually the Kenneth Branagh directed one is actually the closest one to the book that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I'm not saying, and I love the Universal ones, like the old ones, like with Boris Karloff, but those are.
Too. But that's not what the book was.
Yeah, that's like that's only like a tiny little part of the story.
Yeah.
And the fact that the creature is like he's still sympathetic, but he's inarticulate, like he can't talk and stuff. That is not at all like the book.
Yeah,
in the book he
he's
was
got
like a
flowery language.
yeah, he was like a super philosophical.
Yeah, real philosophical and shit.
Yeah, it was like this whole fucking because she, like I said, she was making a statement about the doctor, like his sin being he had created essentially a child, but because he wasn't a woman, he couldn't have a child naturally, so he had to build one out of corpses.
Also, it's an insult against God.
Yeah, and he brought it to life artificially, and then he immediately abandoned it because it didn't come out the way he expected it to.
Yeah.
So to her, that was like his greatest sin, I guess, was that he abandoned his creation. And that was kind of like a big thing for her. But yeah, there's like all kind of philosophical. Like I said, go like read her fucking. She's a fascinating person, and we just like kind of scratched the surface. Because I feel like even nowadays, like all she's known for is Frankenstein, which is good, you know. But she wrote like a bunch of other shit too, and she's like really interesting. But yeah, so sorry we kind of our shit kind of like cut off in the middle, but at least we have a part 2 going. So yeah, so I guess we'll kind of shut it down for the evening. And I might have one more drink. It's
Okay,
only
let's go over
Wednesday.
there.
And, you know, so we'll see you guys Friday night. And Friday night, we'll have some more drinks. We'll do a sidetrack show.
Yep.
We'll talk about some shit. Whatever it is that we talk about, we'll come up with it at the time. Tomorrow, we might go see Halloween Kills. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it goes.
I mean,
Dune's
yeah.
coming up, too.
Yeah, actually, Dune starts. Well, it probably starts tomorrow night or Friday. So I don't know. We'll see. Because we're still paying for that fucking Stubbs A-list thing.
Yeah.
So we might as well go see some free fucking movies.
Yep.
Just saying. All right. So thanks everybody for dropping by this evening for this topic that I've been wanting to do for a really long time. I love this kind of shit. So yeah, remember, like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, and we will see you guys again on Friday night. Thanks for dropping by. Thanks for super chats. We'll see you then. Bye.